let's check out what questions we have. So Namdi asks, how do you stop an agent from outputting an old value in its context rather than rerunning a function tool or an API call? Well, I guess the question is there, what are the situations in which the agent is outputting the old value in its context? Is this where you have like a really long conversation history and it's deciding to use its cached, its cached results instead of recalling a function? Is that the situation you're running into? I'm curious, like what sort of failure situations you're seeing there. So it's an exchange rate agent, and are you saying that previously in the history, like the exchange rates change over time? I mean, so one thing you could do, this could be a good use of middleware, right? Is that you could invalidate previous tool call returns. Like if you know that tool calls tools are returning values that get out of date, then you could build some middleware that says, okay, like, we're going to look back at the tool call history. And for this particular kind of tool call, if the timestamp is, 10 minutes, too old, right? It's 10 minutes old or an hour old, 3 days old, whatever it is, right? Then you could just remove that tool call from the history, right? And there's certainly it's very common to mess with tool calls in middleware, because a lot of people, when they summarize, they might decide to leave out tool calls, right? So remember we talked about that last week. We talked about middleware and all the different kinds of middleware you can do. So yeah, I would do that. I mean, you can also, of course, put in the prompt inspect the value and see how old it is. But I think that sounds like a really nice opportunity for using tool calls. So I think you would need to. The problem is you can't do it as function middleware. You'd have to do it because the issue is it's not even calling the function at all. So you would want to have it be either agent level or chat level, where you look at it. You could basically base it off the summarization middleware that we showed. Let me bring up, right? We did summarization. So that's what I would try doing, is seeing if you can kick out the old tool return values. Yeah, the agent didn't respect the prompt. I'm not surprised. Agents don't always respect prompts. So yeah, I would think you'd want to do some middleware that removes those old tool return values. Okay, where do I post these Discord sessions? Everything gets posted to this. Let me give the nice version of the links. This resources thread here. You'll find everything posted there. And for the office hours in particular, I even post every question as a comment. So that's why we do the recordings, is because then I have an agent go through and make these into nice write-ups. All right. Now we have a question from the onlywhere. How do you prevent malicious prompts from proliferating your workflows? Well, it depends what kind of malicious prompt we're talking about here, but generally, when it comes to safety, let me just get the safety deck. Safety. We did talk a bit about safety on Thursday, but we really didn't get to dive deep into it. Let me come on PowerPoint. You can do this. Safety. Just trying to find. Okay, that one should work. Yeah. Give me a safety deck. This one. With PowerPoint, there's always 6 different versions of the document. You don't know which one's going to work. Okay. So with safety, we like to think about the risk mitigation layers, right? So the system message and grounding can help, but it's, it also, it has a lot of limitations, right? So you want, ideally you want a separate safety system that's checking for something like malicious prompts. And also you want the model itself to be fairly safe, right? So I talked about this, that LLMs, like they have this training process. And so many of them go through this training called RLHF that makes them safer. So you do want to use like a frontier level model that has been through really vigorous RLHF and specifically for safety. So whenever you're like looking at a new model, you can look at its model card and you can see what safety red teaming they did on the model itself. So I have some like examples of model cards here, but general best practice is that when a new model comes out, the provider will come out with a model card. Now, there are some providers like Grok that doesn't follow those best practices necessarily. So I have not seen their model cards. So I don't use those models personally. So I only use models that have model cards that show that they've explicitly been through a safety RLHF, right? So that's on the model layer. And then on Azure, we have this content safety system. And in the content safety system, let me like make this like way bigger. You can see that you can configure the sorts of stuff it blocks. And it also has configuration for jailbreak, 2 different kinds of jailbreak, also use of protected materials, right? So if you're using models hosted on Foundry, as it's now called, then you will get the filters built in and it'll default to medium. I actually got blocked for several of my messages yesterday. So, medium will block a good number of things. But you can make that threshold higher. You can make it lower. You can turn on jailbreak detection. So I would certainly recommend using Azure deployed models because we do care a lot about safety because we are making, production level applications. So yeah, that's what I would recommend is, using safety layers. Like you can, put stuff in your prompt, but the prompt can only go so far. So yeah, you can put stuff in your prompt, but you really, you want it to be part of the model and you want it to be ideally like a separate system. So those are, some of my suggestions there. Okay, so let's see so Doc says, what would be your recommended approach of integrating the GitHub Copilot CLI and SDK in a DevOps workflow, right? And so Gwen followed up, like, what kind of DevOps workflow? What are you trying to build and accomplish? Like, are you trying to do something in CI or trying to do something locally? I haven't built many automations using SDK yet. Like we did have an experiment. I did just do some experiments with it, but I haven't done any automation that I'm like using a lot of, but let me just get my examples. Cause I did have a live stream where I just played with the SDK the whole time. And here is the experiments branch that I was using. So, you can visualize your PRs, triager. This is the main thing I care about is triaging issues. So I was using it to triage issues. So generally what I would say is that if there's something that, you're currently able to use any sort of coding agent for, like GitHub Copilot or Claude Code or whatever, and it's something you do a lot, then you may be able to build automation for it, right? Like a script that'll just do it for you. That's easier to run. And you can even be running these things in GitHub Actions in CI. We recently came up with this GitHub agentic workflows, and this is kind of a different thing, not using the Copilot SDK. Is this correct? Let's see, February 13th, this should be correct. Okay. So these are workflows that use LLMs. I don't think they actually use the Copilot CLI or SDK. They can actually. Yeah, so they can use Copilot CLI. But the point about these workflows is that you write them just in plain text, basically with some security YAML, and then it'll generate the workflow for you. Because basically, like, it's kind of hard to write workflows. I don't know if you've ever written a GitHub Actions workflow. it's actually kind of hard to do it. So the idea here is that they're trying to make it really easy for you to write workflows that still have security boundaries, but that can do like useful things, right? Daily repo report. They have tons and tons of examples here of different workflows. So they have chat ops, data ops, issue ops, project ops, multi-repo ops, right? So that might be what you're looking for. So these will, the idea here is that you're writing your workflows in plain text, and it is generating the workflow file for you, right? So this is all you write, is you have some front matter that says, okay, these are your permissions, because this is the security part is what's really important, right? You say, okay, this is when you're going to run. These are your permissions. This is what you're allowed to output. And these are the tools you're allowed to use. Like, this is like the GitHub MCP server. And then the rest of your workflow is just markdown. And so basically you compile this into a workflow file, and it adheres to these security constraints, but then, enables all this to happen. So this is a neat way of getting started with using LLMs in your GitHub Actions without having to learn like how to build workflows, because that's like too hard. So the example was analyzing CVE's and dependencies and making corrective actions on the PR. So there you'd have to, so that would be something I would certainly try using this was, because you should be able to do that on like pull request, right? So on pull request, you could read the contents of the PR and you could tell it to analyze those. And tell it like, what tools it could use if you need to configure it. You can probably configure it with custom MCP servers as well, if you want to do that. So I would try that since you do want it to work as in reaction to a PR, then I think this is going to be your easiest path for doing that. You can probably if you're comfortable writing workflows and you want to do that, you should probably be able to use the Copilot CLI yourself from a workflow. But I don't have an example of that offhand. Have I tried? Okay. So have I tried building math applications using Claude Code or Codex? I have not. I've only used Codex once just to try it out when it came out, when the desktop app came out for Mac a few weeks ago, and it was good. It was quite good. And I actually don't even know if I've ever used Claude Code. I've seen it quite a bit. I see it demoed a lot. So, so I have not. I built, I built all these examples using GitHub Copilot. So if it might be useful to see what my agents.md looks like for this repo. Right. So I tell it, we're using the Microsoft Agent Framework. The repo is here. We're using Python. I told it that it's also known as math, which is helpful because then I can just write math in the chat. I told it that it's changing a lot. I pointed the change log. I pointed the framework. I told it what MCP server can use. So this, I would say this is just generally useful information for any coding agent that you're using. So you may want to put that in your agents.md. And it's been pretty good. It will, because we are using a very, very latest version here, like you can see we're pinned to a hash. Oftentimes it will actually just search through the entire agent framework code base, since it knows to do that, and figure things out based off the code base itself. I think the rest, are not as useful, but this top part here should be generally useful for any coding agents. All right, question from Bain. How likely is there to be a scenario where the conditional workflow keeps requesting a revision, causing an infinite loop, and is there a way and need to prevent that? Yeah, great question. And this actually relates to one I saw in the chat. Yeah, that is very possible. I don't remember which one it was that was having that issue, but there was one where I was having that issue, and I had to make the reviewer less critical. And it might have been this one. There was certainly one. But I think there was one where I added, let me see, max. Is it max turn? No, max iteration. Okay, yeah. All right, so here you can see that in this one, Oh, because I think Gwen, wasn't this one I had to change because you said this was too low? Oh yeah, because this one, yeah. Oh, I didn't change it in Spanish. Sorry, Gwen. Okay, so yeah, Gwen was saying when Gwen did this in maybe code spaces that it required way too many. It required more than 8 iterations. So I bumped it to 20, right? So yes, you can have situations where it will loop a lot, and you have to decide, like, what's going to happen if it goes over those max iterations. Let me actually see what does happen for workflow convergence, right? Default is 100. All right, what if we just change that to 2? Because the question is, when is it going to stop? At what node is it going to stop? And how are you going to handle that, right? So probably what you want to do in reality, there's probably some sort of good like error handling that we could do. Let me see. Let's just ask, what's best practice for handling a workflow getting in a loop? What will it do? See, I just asked, and let it do some research here, dig into the code. So you can see quite a few of ours do have this max iterations set on it. And you can, like, this is also something, this was on the workflow level, but I believe we can do it on, we've done it on the edge level as well. Let's see, source, target, condition, no. Oh, I know, we've done this also in the built-in orchestrations. They have their own ways of doing it. Okay. All right, so here I set the max iterations really low. Are we going to get an error? I feel like it would probably be an error, but we're looking at the code now, right? So you can see we're looking at the code. What happens when we reach max iterations? Like, do we get a particular error when that happens? Yeah, well, I set this down. I'm running this right now with 2. I'm trying to run into that situation. Okay, great, good, got it. We get a particular exception. Runner did not converge. So probably, best practice for production would be, you could wrap this whole thing in a try except. Workflow convergence exception, because you would decide, like, what this is like dividing by 0, right? Like, what should you do in that case, right? Like, what should happen, right? Do you just mark this as needs a human? Like, what do you do, right? You just put it in your log, so you figure out why, what stage was too critical that it didn't get passed. So that would be like the bare bones thing I would do, would be to catch that exception, because you don't want exceptions happening in production. But there might be other clever things to do as well. We'll see if Copilot learns anything from its experimentations here. And Namdi says, oh, the LLMs get into an attractor state. Maybe you need to summarize and restart. Well, yeah, you could also, on the agent level, remember, we can add, like, if the agent is having too many iterations, like, you could add in some middleware there to say, the agent is going too long, it's doing too many tool calls, right? So if it's on the agent level, then I would address that with middleware. On the workflow level, we don't really have a notion of middleware for workflows, because you would just add in executors at points. What about output executors? What is that? No. Yeah, so you don't really have a notion of middleware for workflows, but you can do exception handling, and you could add additional executors in as helpful. Oh, that's a good question. Does the executor contest include iteration count? It does. It does. I know that because of examples for Thursday that I was working on. Yeah, it does. Let me see if I can bring up the workflow context. Let's go to that definition. Actually, I can just show you. I have this. I happen to have serialized workflows here. Okay, workflow. Oh, we did get this open. Okay, let me also just run this. Okay, so here, and let me just format this. Okay. So yeah, you can see like this is like the this is a serialized state of a workflow, and you can see that it has an iteration count in here. Let me see if that's on workflow context. Is that where it is? Send message, yield output. Do we have iteration? Iteration. No. Where is it actually? Agent executor response. What does this have in it? Executor ID. Okay. All right. So it says, yeah, track revision. Oh, this is what interesting. Okay. So, it's saying that we should use workflow state to break loops intentionally. That you could certainly do if we can't actually. I thought we would be able to get access to the iteration count in the context, but now I'm not seeing it there. So if we can't access it just naturally, then yeah, we can add our own state to break loops, right? With set state and get state. And then yeah, catching the exception, right? Design conditional edges to guarantee termination, right? Having a default fallback. That's what we talked about that in there. And then you can also instruct the agent in the system prompt. So there's some good ideas there. I think there's a good question as to whether we can directly access that iteration count without having to save it ourselves. But if we can't, then we could save it ourselves. Robert, yeah, it is. We are recording this session, so I will post it in the resources link afterwards. Yeah, Tea Leaf says when you run switch case DevUI, you get an unhandled exception. Is it something in your environment? I got that as well. That's why I didn't use DevUI for that one. I'll have to do. Let me write a note. It might be a bug with agent framework, or it might be the way in which we're giving the input. I didn't have enough time to debug it this morning when I ran into it, but I ran into the same thing. So it's not just your environment. I ran into that as well. Let's see, because it gets what is the start input for classifier? What do we run this with? We run this with just a straight message. So I feel like here, I'll show you. We can let's just do this live and get this filed. So I'll show you how I like file issues. So we're gonna run this with DevUI because it should be able to handle the free text input here because we're doing the same input and yeah. All right, so let's replicate that bug and report it like good responsible library users. Starting it up. Yeah, I had a few weird things with DevUI today, especially with my conditional workflows, where it like wasn't continuing to the node. So I don't know if it was like weird latency on my end or something. So that's why I didn't use DevUI for everything. All right, so we're gonna try this out. We're gonna set the message, and then I think we'll get the error pretty quickly here. I think it's on, what is it? Runtime has no category question. Yeah, and it says failed. Category question. Let me take a little screenshot here. Okay. All right, so then we got that error. Event type. Yeah, so it's coming through as a dictionary. instead of coming through as the value itself. So let's say getting this bug only in DevUI, but not when running via CLI. All right, so we'll let Copilot do a little investigation there and see if it can figure that out. All right. Yeah, so Tea Leaf says in a couple of the other switching ones, the workflow didn't complete under DevUI, but worked fine with command line. Okay, so you saw the same thing I did. And it's really weird because I don't know, it might be a recent regression. So I'll also report that. They definitely worked when I first made them, but we are continually pinning to the latest version of Agent Framework, and there could have been some slight changes there. And it might be something, so it may be that there's some weirdness with structured outputs in particular, that it's maybe handling them differently than before. Because all of these examples are using structured outputs now. And I like to push structured outputs to their limit because I love structured outputs so much. And what is it? Not even, it didn't reply. All right, we're going to pick a different model. Okay. All right. And we'll just retry that. Okay. Everything's being a little slow. All right. So while that's working, what other questions that people have? I'll just open the slides just as a reminder. Oh, I've got so many of these ones open. Okay, closed. Okay. Oh, we opened this one too. Okay. Am I taking part as in Agents League judging? No, I'm not. My colleagues are doing Agents League. This series is keeping me pretty busy. I do have a Friday talk as part of the RAG JavaScript, part of the JavaScript series. I'll be talking about RAG. So that I am doing that on Friday. But yeah, this series is keeping me pretty busy this week. Okay, so here's a reminder of what we talked about, the switch case, the state management, all that stuff. And then we showed that example at the end. I think just all my models are being slow this morning. What else can I show? Also a reminder, like all of this is documented, although sometimes the documentation can be slightly out of date with like very latest, but I've been trying to file bugs whenever I run in stuff. So for workflows, there's this whole section here. So we have the workflows, and basically by the end of this week, we will have gone through almost everything in here. I tried to be pretty thorough. There's a couple orchestrations we're skipping one of the orchestrations, but we're trying to be pretty thorough here. So it's like you don't even have to read the documentation. You can just come to the series. Oh, there's a GitHub outage happening. Oh, good. All right. Well, I guess we won't use GitHub. Oh, that's why. Okay. All right. And what's the link to the JavaScript series? That's a good question. What is the link to the JavaScript series? We'll just search Microsoft Reactor. And I'm sure we can find it on Reactor. Let's look for RAG, JavaScript. Nope. Okay, RAG. I think it's called Buildathon. There we go. The JavaScript AI Buildathon. Okay. And here we go. So I need to remind myself how JavaScript works before then. I actually was mostly a JavaScript developer for many years. I always use both JavaScript and Python. But I only use JavaScript on the server for one company. Usually I use Python on the server. If you cannot hear, typically that's a Discord issue. And, you know, people usually recommend restarting Discord in that case. All right. Do we have any other questions? Any desires for what we do for our next series? Is there a certification about agents from Microsoft? That's a good question. Let's look at Learn Microsoft certifications. I know there's often recommendations for our, like for different AI ones we have. Isn't it like 900 or something that people, there's one that people always are recommending. Oh, there's one for Copilot now. Let me find the AI, is it like AI engineer or something? As your AI engineer associate. I feel like this one gets recommended a lot.